So I'm County Supervisor Neal Coonerty. This is my district here, and I welcome you all to this forum. This is a very important subject for our community and an important subject for the state of California, and we're hoping tonight to hear from you, to hear a little bit about the programs, about how it actually works, and to get your feedback. An important part of this is really going to be to hear from you. As many of you know, on October 1st of this year, the newly enacted public safety realignment legislation went into effect. Basically, under realignment, local government now takes responsibility for the incarceration of non-sex offenders, non-violent offenders, non-strike law offenders. We will now be housing them in our local jails instead of sending them to state prison as they're sentenced. Tonight we want to provide some of the facts and the nuts and bolts about how realignment will work. Again, as our poster says, safety first. We want to make sure that that this community is as safe as it can be, given this legislation coming down from Sacramento. We want to be able to take a look at how it will work, the new alternatives that might be open to us, some unique perspectives from a victim of crime who is also a service provider, a former offender who has successfully completed an alternative to incarceration program. We're going to give you these perspectives. Each of them has been asked to limit their talk to 10 minutes. Now, each individual that's up here could probably talk for a half hour to an hour about this and really tell us something that would be interesting and would educate us on this issue. We're going to ask them to limit it for 10 minutes because the second half of the program is really meant to be the question and answer period, and that's the part that is going to be very, very important for us. On your seats, there's cards that everybody has, and that's meant to write down questions that you have as you hear a presentation or from the outset, concerns, ideas, things that you want to see addressed. And then we're going to have these people here plus a broader panel who are going to be able to answer those questions or respond to any concerns that you have and be able to do this so that we'll be able, instead of it just be a presentation, it's going to be focused on what your concerns are and what we need to hear from you, because you are the community. That's why we're here, is to really hear from you. So to get started, so that we don't run over time and we start talking about this subject, this important subject, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, which is Superior Court Judge Paul Marigonda. We've included a brief biography of Judge Marigonda and all the other speakers in your program, so we don't want to take up your time going over it here, but take a look at that and you'll see some of the background. He will give us an overview of realignment, addressing some of the misconceptions about how realignment will work, sentencing alternatives, and his perspective on some of the opportunities and the challenges that this legislation comes down. So please join me in welcoming Superior Court Judge Paul Marigonda.
All right, good evening. Thank you very much, Supervisor Coonerty, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to come and address all of you and hopefully answer some of your questions and give you a little bit of background about what this realignment, as it's called, is. I'm Paul Marigonda. I'm the supervising judge of the criminal court in Santa Cruz, and all of our criminal courts are located in Santa Cruz, and I'm one of the 3 felony judges assigned. So I'm one of the ones that handle these cases that happen now under realignment. What is realignment? It stems from Assembly Bill 109, which was introduced back in March of this year and introduced March 15th, passed March 17th, and signed in early April by Governor Jerry Brown. It's one of the most far-reaching changes in sentencing in California since the determinate sentencing law was signed in 1976 by Governor Jerry Brown. And it's kind of coming full circle in many ways. What the determinate sentencing law did was, for all crimes, except certain very serious crimes, create a triad of punishments, a low, middle, and upper term that could be served in the state prison. What AB 109 has done is not really change the punishment, it changes where the sentence is served. So before these non-violent, non-serious crimes, as they're classified, and I'll give you a sense of which ones they are, would be punishable by someone being sent to state prison. Now, under realignment, Assembly Bill 109 tells us those same crimes would be punishable in a local county jail. The intent also of the legislation was to try to get at the root causes of what is causing our recidivism level to be so high. Right now, for people who are released from prison on parole, the recidivism rate, which means that their rate when they go back to prison, is around between 65 and 70%. So something is not working. Over the last 25 years, 30 years, we've seen a growth in the number of prisons in the state of California, and all you have to go do is to go to some of the Central Valley communities, and the prison is the main source of industry there. And so we've had this proliferation of prisons and parole and people going back into prison on parole violations. And so the idea as well is to treat the offender in the local community, take care of the punishment within the local community, and hopefully address the root causes of recidivism. As I said, what it does is reclassifies all nonviolent, non-serious felonies to be punished in county jail. Now these includes crimes such as theft, grand theft, auto burglary, identity theft, drug sales, some felony driving under the influence, possessing stolen property, vandalism. State prison, as I said, is now limited to someone who commits a violent or serious crime. Those are listed in the penal code, and those, are assault with a weapon, murder, sex offenses, or if the person has had a prior serious or violent felony in their past, any kind, or they've been subject to being a sex offender registrant for any level. Those offenders, no matter what kind of underlying crime they have, can still be sent to prison. So as an example, someone who has committed a prior serious felony, committed a robbery in his past 15 years ago, commits an auto theft now, that person can still be sent to state prison by the court. It's only if they have no prior serious or violent felony that they cannot be sent to state prison, that they'd have to be sent to county jail. I'll give you one example of that as I talk about is auto theft. Previously, you could sentence the offender to 16 months to 3 years in state prison. Now it would be 16 months to 3 years in county jail. Sale of heroin, up to 5 years in state prison previously, it'd be up to 5 years in county jail now. Again, if the person has any prior serious or violent felony conviction in their background, that is a disqualifying offense. The other thing the legislature did during some cleanup legislation over the summer is they carved out about 60 crimes and took them out. They were formerly classified as nonviolent or non-serious in March, and now have been classified as crimes that you could send a person to state prison. Examples of that are felony domestic violence, felony assault, felony driving under the influence where someone is injured, any kind of injury, felony child endangerment. Even though those are not listed as, quote, serious or violent, end quote, a judge still has the ability now to send an offender for that to state prison. And none of this law changes a judge's ability to still sentence people to probation and county jail. The other thing that realignment does is it changes the way, one, where the sentence is served and what happens after the sentence. Previously, if someone was sentenced to state prison, they could be released from prison on parole. Under realignment, if a person is sentenced to 3 years in county jail, they serve their sentence, and under the credit law, they get good time credits of a half, so they serve half their sentence. That's a legislative decision, and then they'd be released with no parole period. Recognizing that, the Administrative Office of the Courts, which is the governing body of all the courts statewide, worked with the legislature and Governor Brown's office to craft what is called the ability to split sentences. So, for example, a judge can now sentence somebody to 3 years in jail, but the judge can split that sentence, any part of it, and say, for example, you will serve 1 year in jail and you'll serve the other 2 on a mandatory community supervision. Now, that mandatory community supervision is just like being on probation, and it's through our probation department with terms and conditions that are dictated by the judge and then followed through by probation, which allow for a greater control over the particular defendant. The nice thing about that, and what's very effective, is that it allows a person still to be under supervision, and if they violate the terms of their conditions, they can be sentenced to jail up to 180 days jail for a violation, up to the balance of their term that is left. Also, this legislation allows a probation officer to take a defendant into custody for 10 days. That's called flash incarceration. It's been a very effective method of dealing with, we've been dealing with that in the drug court, which is one of our most successful programs for years. Someone commits a violation, they go into custody for 10 days immediately. You don't wait to calendar a hearing before a judge. You don't wait 2 weeks to get a court date. It's effectively dealt with at that time. This legislation provides that. The other important part about this legislation, why Santa Cruz has an opportunity to be a leader, is that it calls for evidence-based practices on probation. Well, before this legislation was even passed, Santa Cruz County had signed on to be a pilot program for an evidence-based probation grant through the Administrative Office of the Courts, in which there are 4 pilot counties: Napa, San Francisco, Santa Cruz, and Orange. And so we were already implementing these evidence-based practices in this county before this legislation called for it. And you will hear more about that in the next, from the next speakers. But we're kind of ahead of the curve in that sense. The other part of it is that you've heard some people who are released from prison will be placed on what's called community supervision instead of parole, and they will be supervised again by the local probation department. That will require the courts to hold hearings for any violations of probation, any final violations, but in our court, we're prepared to handle that. The practical effect of what you see is that in terms of our first month in implementing it in Santa Cruz County, is we've been able to use the law in many different ways. There have been people, I have sentenced someone to a straight jail sentence. Now, he didn't have any ties to this community, and once his sentence is over, he'll go back to his other county. But people who I know that are going to be living here, that are going to be part of our community, myself and the other judges have been utilizing what's called these split sentences, where we give them some jail time and then we put them on the supervision. Others who do not qualify, perhaps they have one of what we call these disqualifying crimes, or people who have committed a violent or serious felony, or have a violent or serious felony in their past. People have been continued to be sent to state prison. Because as we now know, there is still apparently going to be room in there for them. So what you have is we're trying to balance what the legislature's intended, which is to deal with the overcrowding problem, which also led to many lawsuits, and the United States Supreme Court ruled against the state of California earlier this year in the Brown versus Plata decision, while addressing the causes, trying to get to the roots of the recidivism by implementing more local community-based programming. But this still doesn't take away the ability of the court to sentence violent, serious offenders, people who commit sex offenses, people who have these crimes in the past. The court, I want to make it very clear, is not precluded from sending those offenders still to state prison. And so I know that we'll have questions, but it will be a balancing, and as with every single case, you look at the particulars of the offender. There may be an offender who is placed on probation, has no prior criminal history, which we have done for years in the past, and judges have had the ability to put people on probation up to 5 years and sentence them to up to a year in county jail. That hasn't changed with the legislation. It's those that are not placed on probation that would have otherwise been sent to prison for certain offenses, not all, which are now serving them in county jail. And that, in essence, is the what AB 109 and the realignment is. It really isn't changing the sentences, it's where and how they're served, and maybe doing so in a more effective way. because if you can incarcerate someone for some period of time, but then give some kind of supervision that allows them to work in the community and perhaps work toward restitution, which is a big, big issue for victims, which allows them to get some of the training and change their behavior patterns, then you don't have the situation where you're going to have that offender back in the community. One of the things that you learn that was very surprising to me is that it's not always just a drug and an alcohol addiction. There are so many other factors: education, employment, family situation, peer situation, that are major factors in people reoffending. And this legislation is intended to hopefully address that. So that's a broad overview of the realignment legislation and how it's working so far in the courts. There will be a lot of changes. Changes will happen through the legislature. There will be changes from the courts. The court process obviously will take a lot longer. Immediate changes, the legislature has the power to do so. And I'll be looking forward to your questions after. So thank you.
Thank you, Judge Marigonda. And don't forget, if you have questions or you have any comments that you want to make, you can write them down, and there'll be people here that'll pick them up so that we can answer them in the last hour. I'd like to introduce our County Sheriff, Phil Wowak, who will give us a snapshot of who's in our county jail, what are the types of crimes and offenses that will be eligible for alternatives, how offenders will be assessed for alternatives, and the opportunities for expanding alternatives. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff Wowak.
Good evening and welcome. I kept a few notes here because I'm going to be limited to 10 minutes, and so I got to stay on track. Again, as Supervisor Coonerty mentioned, my name is Phil Wowak. I'm your county sheriff. And my role in working for you all is to not only provide patrol and police protective services for the county of Santa Cruz, it's also to keep the county jails. And as Judge Marigonda just spoke to you about what AB 109 was and the changes in sentencing, it had a great impact on our jail system and the system that I run for you all. So what Supervisor Coonerty asked me to do tonight was to give you an idea of who's in custody in the county jail system, what the county jail system's capacity is to date, and what we see about ideas going forward in being able to meet the challenges of AB 109, realignment, and then ultimately the goal of corrections is the rehabilitation of those offenders that we take into the system and try and keep them from coming back into our system over and over again. So as I mentioned, my role is to run the county jail system. There are 3 county jails in Santa Cruz County now. There used to be 4 jail systems, but a year ago we had to close one facility due to some budget challenges. Today's capacity for Santa Cruz County jail system is 448 adults. That's both men and women offenders that we can house in our county jail system with the beds that we have. So today we had 475 people in those 448 beds, and we regularly run at a capacity of about 115%. So we're very similar to the state prison system in that we're constantly overcrowded. We're constantly looking for alternatives to incarceration. We're constantly looking for ways to house people and move offenders throughout the system to keep them safe. Of that demographic, of those 475 people that were in custody today, 48 of them are women, and the remainder are men, and they're housed in both the city of Santa Cruz or in our South County facility in Watsonville. The South County facility in Watsonville is a men's-only facility that's rated for 115 inmates. That facility houses sentenced-only inmates under normal circumstances. With the implementation of AB 109, we're starting to become challenged with bed space. So, in order to meet the needs and demands of AB 109 and to move forward and ensure our custody system is safe for all that's in it, and to ensure that our release of inmates into the community are safe for the community, we had to implement a new plan. With me tonight is Chief Jim Hart. He's our Chief Deputy of Corrections, and he is the inventor of our Custody Alternatives Program. He brought about, or came into his new role in the jail system with quite a challenge, because he came in right before AB 109 was started, and he and I sat down and really worked hard on how are we going to take in a new offender population in addition to the 115% capacity that we have today. So for our first role was to sit down and look at who are we going to get in that offender base, the people that the judge just talked to you about, the offenders that are going to be sentenced into our facility. Our estimations are that we'll receive between 80 and 120 inmates per year for the first 2 years, in addition to the regular workflow that we had through the jail system. At the end of the second year, inmates will start to attrit out or time out in their custody as one comes in. But at that end of that second year, we have the potential of being 240 inmates over what we had today. What I just mentioned to you was that we're already at 115%. So we have an inventory control problem. So what we did was we sat down and thought, okay, how can we treat all of the 3 tenets of corrections? The first tenet, or the first goal, the first responsibility of corrections is public safety. Our role is to lock people up and keep them from reoffending or re-victimizing people in the community. Public safety is mission number 1, regardless of what we decide to do. The second role of corrections is accountability. You must pay your sentence for the crime that you commit. And that's why the judge sentences you to a certain amount of time in custody. That's why you receive a certain amount of probation, and you receive restitution or the responsibility to be accountable for your crime. The third role of corrections, and quite frankly one of the most important roles and one of the overarching goals of AB 109, is rehabilitation. And that's the core reason that you're here tonight, I believe, and that's why we're hosted by a number of different treatment providers, and that's why there's a number of different tables in the back with information for you. It's to really remodel and to really look at the correction system in such a way that we do something when people are sentenced in the criminal justice system to changing their behavior and preventing them from coming back. Judge Marigonda touched on it, and that is our recidivism rate in Santa Cruz County. Recidivism is when a person comes back into custody after being released for a previous offense. So a reoffense and bringing somebody back into custody. 7 out of 10 people that come through the jail system in Santa Cruz County return to the jail system again. A 70% recidivism rate is unacceptable. So if we're taking steps toward changing the correction system, the clear and most important goal here in those changes is to increase rehabilitation, reduce recidivism. So the chief and I worked hard on a custody alternatives program, again, to make space for the 240 inmates that we anticipate we will receive in the next 24 months. So we looked first at the population that we had in custody. About 40% of our population was sentenced inmates, people serving time for the crimes they had committed, they'd gone through their court process. And 60% of our population was awaiting sentence. So immediately, 60% of the population was probably out of reach for us. We didn't have the ability to impact that group because they're waiting to get through the court system. So looking at the 40% or the remainder of that sentence population, we started looking at the severity of their sentence. We started looking at their motivation and ability to rehabilitate, and we started looking at alternatives to housing them. Now, each and every inmate gets a bed, has a space in the facility, gets 3 meals a day, gets some inmate programming, some education, food and clothing. Okay? If we looked at that population and we started looking at the expense to house those people, we started looking at a better way to use the funding that we had and to achieve a better goal, those 3 goals of public safety, accountability, and rehabilitation. So the chief and I drew up a plan that is now called the Custody Alternatives Program, and the core of the Custody Alternatives Program is an electronic monitoring or a tiered custody and release program for inmates that come into the facility. And before I go any further with an electronic monitoring program or the idea about it, I want you all to know that the largest and first piece that the custody alternatives team looks at when they decide whether a person is going to be released from jail and back into the community is whether or not they present a risk to the community by going back into society. So our goal is really to ensure safety and to ensure that no one causes a problem when being released back into custody. The second piece is the team sits down and they evaluate each and every inmate that applies for the program. They evaluate them in a number of different ways. Their ability to pay for their custody alternative program, their ability to obtain employment while they're out of custody, their ability to pay their restitution for the crime that they had been convicted of if they have restitution ordered by the bench, and then their likelihood and motivation to succeed while on a custody alternative plan. We've decided to implement the custody alternative program in such a way that it is an incentive-based, tiered program for custody. So a person coming into custody from the bench will not go immediately to electronic monitoring and go back out into the community. A person will serve time in custody. They will be evaluated. They will be looked at for different programs that they'll be able to move into both in custody and then as they go out of custody and into alternative supervision. And we've partnered this electronic monitoring program with the probation chief, Scott McDonald, who's in the front here. And our goal is to have a system that starts in custody and begins a foundation with an inmate in education and custody incentives, moves them back out into the community, gets them working, gets them back into programs and treatment that involve their family, that involve corrective behavior, and then eventually times them out of their sentence and then hands them off to the probation department. And we've built a foundation that models the probation's treatment plan, and as the judge talked about, an evidence-based practice that is designed, again, to reduce recidivism. So, looking at Santa Cruz County's jail and looking at the 448 beds that we have and looking at the potential for 240 more inmates to be here next year, you would think that we're dealing with quite a manageable population. Those 450 beds that we have in our jail system right now are occupied by some of the 14,000 people that are arrested each year in the county of Santa Cruz and come through that facility. So it's not a very small inventory management system. It's a very large system that processes both the judicial side, the probation side, and then the custody and treatment program. Now our jail system is again such that we partner with a number of different providers already. And as the judge said, we have in place a number of pieces in Santa Cruz County that have given us the ability to make this type of system work moving forward, and we believe that we'll be very successful in doing so. And our goal, speaking to you tonight and hopefully answering your questions in a few minutes, is that we want you to feel that you're safe in the implementation of our program. We want your voice to be heard about how we will monitor that system as it goes into place. And we want you to know that this is only the beginning. This system and the implementation of AB 109 did not come about after one or two meetings by a few core group of people. The law, as the judge mentioned, provided for each individual county to come up with a program that was put into place by the decision makers and the justice system within the community. The people that were formed, and it was chaired by our chief probation officer, are called the Community Corrections Partnership. Our Community Corrections Partnership came to the table, and this custody alternatives plan was the first piece of a multi-phased approach to implementing AB 109. Future changes to the judicial system will be borne out by the Community Corrections Partnership, and that will involve the treatment of offenders both in custody and out of custody, and then future implementation of other custody alternative programs as we move forward. Now, the last thing I want to do is mention that we have a system in place that is a very comprehensive custody system, and it is ripe for change in such a way that I believe that we can achieve the overarching goal of recidivism reduction while keeping public safety and accountability in place in the custody system. As I mentioned, Santa Cruz County's main jail system is down in Water Street next to the courthouse, and the other facility is in Watsonville. We have the facility that was depopulated and has been unfunded over the last year is a large amount of square footage that it is in place and ripe for putting in custody treatment program through outside service providers and through our inmate welfare system that we have in place today. So as we move forward, we want to hear input from the community as to how we will run these programs both in the custody facility and once we move people out into the community corrections model. Now, lastly, I want to just say that I have had one of the largest changes in my almost 30-year career in law enforcement happen in the last 6 months. And the judge and I have touched on that in just a quick, brief 5 to 10 minute excerpt. And Chief McDonald and I have both shared many aspirin pills over the last 6 months trying to figure out exactly how we're going to be able to take on this giant challenge. And I really applaud each and every one of you. This is not your standard community meeting where people come out and they sit down and they want to talk to you about you know, a new park or a roadway improvement plan. I just can't tell you how proud you should be of yourselves about being in an audience this size, coming out here and hearing about such a very sweeping change and being an integral part in the change in our justice system. And what you're going to hear from in just a minute is another county and how they've implemented other pieces to their out-of-custody treatment in their probation system. And so as you hear those models, I want you to reflect back on what we have in place now in Santa Cruz County, which is a tiered incarceration system that eventually moves an offender back into the community on electronic monitoring and then eventually moves them into the probation system. And when you hear these other ideas that are coming from other communities, please entertain those ideas and become part of that system as we move forward in these changes. I'm going to end there so that I give enough time at the end to answer questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and just another reminder about getting questions out. You know, one of our goals, I think, for everybody that's been involved in this has been to create a program that is safe for our community, is effective for our community, and becomes a model, really, for the state and the nation on how to handle this realignment and how to handle housing of prisoners. But even though we aspire to become a model, that doesn't mean that we aren't up to stealing ideas from other communities that are doing things well. And it's my pleasure to introduce to you San Benito County Probation Chief Brent Cardell and Peter Hernandez. They're from the San Benito County Community Review Board. They have come all the way from San Benito County in order to tell us about this unique award-winning alternatives to incarceration program that they've developed and implemented in their county. I think we all know sort of alternatives to incarceration. There may be electronic monitoring with ankle bracelets, probation, or whatever, but this is another unique way that we can take a look, and it involves citizens. It involves citizens being involved with dealing with criminals who have offended and resolving that in the terms of restorative justice. And these people are here. They've been doing this. It's won awards, and we're going to hear from them about how it works in San Benito County for us to consider whether or not this would work well in this community. So with that, I'd like to have you welcome Chief Cardell and Peter Hernandez.
It's great to be here. It's a nice community that you have here. I'd first like to thank Supervisor Coonerty to giving me this opportunity, and I want you to know that you have a great Chief Probation Officer here in this county that's very productive and aggressive with crime and solutions, Scott McDonald. as the judge and sheriff painted a picture of a problem that we have in this community. And the problem we have is not just on the shoulders of the sheriff and the judge and the probation officers. It's a community problem, and we need to have a community solution, and you're part of the solution. One of the things that we did in Hollister is that we developed a community review board. And what this really means is, as you can see, the judge is going to have huge responsibilities of future violations of law and future technical violations. And that's part of our job, is to report these violations to the judge so he can see these people that are on probation or now parole. So instead of overwhelming the judge with technical violations and clogging the court with cases, we've developed a program that is approved by the judge per offender. And what this really means is these offenders are ordered to complete the community review board. And that's made up of people like you, a diverse group of people that are interested with the crime and the problems in their community. And so what they do is they basically, I'm going to paint a picture quickly, I don't have a lot of time, but what they do is the probation officer basically explains, and the community review board is made up about 5 people per board, and we have several in Hollister. And so what it's made up, you know, with elderly people, young, diverse group, and they hear the violations of these probationers. And so the probation officer will come in and explain their background to the group, and then they'll tell the group what they're on probation for and the violation. And then this group, you, sit down and talk with the person and figure out what's wrong. The judges, the attorneys really don't have this opportunity to sit down with the offender and really get to the root of the problem like the judge talked about earlier. So that's your job, is to help us have a solution of these roots, the root of this problem. And I'll give you an example of a recent board that we had. We had a guy by the name of Danielle who violated his probation. He would drink, he was unemployed, and he would not pay his fines and fees. So we referred him with the judge's approval to the community review board. The community review board basically broke it down and talked to this person, and they gave this person goals. The first goal they gave him, they said, why aren't you working? Well, I don't have a license. Why don't you have a license? Well, I don't have money to go out and pay my fine to get my license back. So they, you know, and sometimes these people need this structure and this basic help because they don't know how to do it. And so what they did is they set goals with this person, and they met with this person weekly. And this person would have to go out and they said, hey, go ask your friends, anyone you can, to come up with $50 to go take the test, get your license. So he did that. He got his license, came back, showed it to the board, and they said, wow, this is great. So they started developing a relationship with this person. This person really wanted to please the board. He became attached to them, and they basically, it's really a form of motivational interviewing to get these people to do what they're supposed to do, to be productive citizens. So he got his license. The next step, they said, okay, let's go get a job. How many times are you interviewing at places? So they gave him, you know, different places, what to do, and then he got a job. Then he got a job, and they came back, and they were ecstatic that he had a job, and then he started paying his fines. It's simple things like this that you can do to help us in the community. Probation officers don't have the time to sit down and coddle and have these folks do what they should be doing. We need your help. We need accountability. And that's exactly what the Community Review Board does, is it makes these people accountable. Our very first parolee from prison came to our office a couple weeks ago. And he was released on Friday, and he had a detainer in Santa Clara, and then he finally showed up to our office Monday afternoon. They usually report about 4:30 if they're dirty, because if they report early, then it gives the probation officers much more time to deal with the problem. So they're pretty wise. So he shows up at 4:30 in the afternoon, and he's dirty for meth. Not an uncommon thing that we experience in the probation department. So the judge talked about this flash incarceration. We imposed that for a few days. In fact, we had the media, you probably saw some clips on this, but we had the media do a little report on this. They didn't really accurately describe this, because really the Community Review Board can only impose, minor things to do. They can't impose incarceration or prison, jail, things like that. They're giving them community service, writing assignments, various things for them to do. So we did this flash incarceration on this guy, and he came to the board. We had an elderly lady. She was in charge of the board. She's about 70 years old. And this hardened criminal was ready to cry, break down and cry, because this 70-year-old really had the wisdom to ask the appropriate questions and to get him back on track. And he now has a job, and he's now clean, doing the things that he should be doing. We've had great success with this program. We've had an 85% success rate for these guys doing basically what they should be doing. Thank you. I don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to answer questions. It's a phenomenal way to address our community problem of crime. But I brought Peter Hernandez. He's on the board. We have a juvenile review board, and we have adult review board that addresses these problems with the parents and families and offenders. So I just would like him to say a few things of what he volunteers, his time. We've recruited over 100 people to volunteer with the probation department. When our people are out of the office, we have tons of people in the office helping us do things. And Peter we're fortunate to have him. He has a full-time job, family, responsibilities like you do, but he has the time to help us out with the Community Review Board. And I just asked him just to kind of give you a little bit of information.
How you doing, folks? I came to be a part of the Juvenile Review Board. I think it was a blessing just in disguise. My whole goal to be a part of the probation was I'm a member of the San Benito County. I've lived there all my life. I love where I live. I love my family. I love the people that I'm acquainted with, all my friends. And I just wanted to be a part of my community. I wanted to be part of the solutions, because I know there's, not just, aside from maybe 109, just the issues that were rising up from gangs to all. So I signed on to volunteer for the probation department, and the Community Review Board came up, and I willingly took it. The way I like to see it is, to me, it's like an engaged citizenship. It's just encouraging individuals to be a part of their community, to be proactive, to not wait for problems to come up, but to really be involved in seeing a difference in whatever the issues are. And I love this Community Review Board, the Review Board, and the Juvenile Review Board, because it really takes a proactive approach. It encourages us as citizens to step up and see what the issues are, and we don't have this, we don't obviously, we're not administrators of the law like police officers or even probation officers. We don't have this, we don't address things in a sense where we try to, we find them or punish them according to what the crime they committed. Where our goal is to be engaged in whatever the personal issue is behind the choices that they made. So as a board, we find ourselves being a lot more, I guess you could say, concerned. We have the heart to really want to see difference in the individual. We're not, we're taking each individual person just as that as a person. So we desire to see difference in this individual. We end up developing a bond with this individual. We address the concerns, and we talk about whatever we see from what they share with us, because we do, we give them a time to address whatever their concerns are, what's on their heart, and we engage them as they share with us. We learn to be very improvisational. We find ourselves addressing the personal issues. We talk about their family life, to their education, to where they're at personally, especially with the juveniles, a lot of it is even their downtime, which, from what I've seen, and just as from experience, they have a lot of time, sometimes too much time, so they find themselves getting involved in doing things that they shouldn't be doing, obviously. But I guess as a father myself, our mindset, you know, I take that mindset as, I'm not trying to call them bad guys. We don't, but just the same, we're very delicate about separating the choices that not separating the choices that they're made from the, you know, the crime that they committed. So we're not saying you're a bad guy because of what you did, but we are saying is that was a bad choice. So we still are going to hold you accountable, but we're not there to condemn you. We're there to see what was the underlying cause. So it gives us a lot more of an opportunity to see what's going on, you know, behind them, you know, behind their issue, behind their, I guess in a sense, in their thoughts and where they're thinking that they get involved, or maybe just a lack of, you know, thinking, you know, and we give them different options. We encourage them with different things. And because we're diverse, we have different, you know, we have from older people to younger people, all responsible citizens. You know, I'm blessed to be a part of a group of members that really do care, and they're from teachers to, you know, to me, just, you know, I'm in retail myself personally, but I care about my community, and that is the goal, is because we present this diverse attitude, we find ourselves kind of picking away at the core issues, and we find ourselves seeing exactly what causes these issues, and then we find ourselves from them engaging and trying to present a plan. If they don't exactly have an idea, which, you know, 9 times out of 10 they don't have an idea of how to solve their own problems, you know, we don't act as problem solvers for them, but we give them a different way of thinking, because they're still encouraged and held accountable to own up to the choices that they're made, and as we address those issues, then they have to come back to us after a month or 2 weeks whenever we reset an appointment. So we're constantly seeing them, and we get to see how they progressed, and after they've set their goals, if any changes happen, and we do give them the alternative, even though we can't administrate the law in a sense. We still, you know, they all know that when they come to us, this is the blessed way, you know, in a sense, and if they don't willingly give in to what they're holding, you know, making the choices to change, then from there you know, we always have the alternative to send them back to probation, and which we are always telling them, you know, we don't want to see you go that route. You know, we want to see the change in you. So give us a reason to have hope in you that you will change. We believe in you. Now we just want you to see that you can believe in yourself. And a lot of the times is lack of faith. So there's, on so many levels, we find ourselves engaging them, and it creates such I think a very productive environment for them to consider other options and put a sense of hope in them that their community does care about them, and they want to see them to return, but return without their vices or their issues that cause them to fall. Thank you.
Well, now that we've heard some facts about how realignment will work, how realignment will affect our jails, and what might be some possible alternatives, we're now going to hear from a victim of crime who also works as a service provider with Friends Outside, and a former offender who has been through an alternative program and has turned his life around. Please welcome Danielle Obinger and Jesus Catarino.
Hello everyone, my name is Danielle Obinger, and I'm the program director of Friends Outside, a program of the Volunteer Center of Santa Cruz. The organization has served those incarcerated, their family members, and those recently released for over 35 years in the Santa Cruz community. The work that we do in changing people's lives is amazing, and I'm proud of the many accomplishments that I have seen. But tonight I have not come here to speak about Friends Outside. Those of you who recognize me from the community have probably heard me speak more than enough on that topic. I came here this evening to share why I chose this profession, or better perhaps, how it came to find me. I moved to Santa Cruz in January 2000 to complete my last 2 years of my bachelor's in psychology. I put myself through college working locally. Today I have a wonderful partner, a 13-year-old stepson, an energetic toddler, and one more on the way, which as of today, I found out was a girl. I truly feel blessed to have this love in my life, but life has not always been so easy. January 7th, 2007 changed my life forever. I would like to say the majority of its effects were negative, but looking back today, it actually brought insight, compassion, and understanding that I was unaware I was capable of knowing. The end result was that I sent a man to prison for 6 years and came to Friends Outside 4 short months later. It began like any other day. It was one of my friend's birthdays, and a couple of us went out to celebrate with a nice dinner. We were out at the wharf where I worked at the time, and I slowly sipped on one drink while enjoying the meal. My recollection from this point forward is either non-existent or fuzzy, and was pieced together by these friends, attorneys, police officers, and others who witnessed the events that evening. According to my friends and others who knew me at the restaurant, I began to act erratically, slur my speech, become very hyper, and ultimately was not like myself. I told my friends that I wanted to stay out, and after attempting to coerce me, they gave up and left me at the restaurant. My supervisor who was there was shocked and knew I needed to go home, but being occupied by business, called a cab to escort me. The cab picked me up and reported to police later that I had explained to him I had lost my money. He told the police that his policy not to drive a person home that does not have cash on them. He instead dropped me off incapacitated downtown. He later admitted that I'd begged him to take me home and that I would get money, but he chose not to take that chance. A police officer reported seeing me downtown, slumped by myself on a curb, but had suspected I was simply another kid partying. A gentleman driving in his car noticed my precarious situation and stopped his car to offer to help me, or at least that was his report from his attorney while on trial at court. He decided that I would best be helped by bringing me back to his place, a small trailer parked on the west side. I began to awake from my drugged slumber. I cannot report that I have the best recollection of events, but things become more defined. I can truly say that whatever angels there are out there woke me to save my life. When I came to, I was not fully dressed, and my boots were being removed from my feet. I remember clearly stating, "I apologize. I do not know how I got here, but whatever idea I may have given you, I just want my things and I want to go." This man turned very aggressive to this comment. I will save the details, as there may be families here and you can probably guess how much of it turned out. After having my head banged against the table more than 30 times, being physically restrained, strangled, and beaten repetitively, I was saved by a neighboring trailer who heard my pleas over and over again that evening. "Somebody please help me, he's going to kill me." The man who saved my life said that I'd actually screamed that for at least 20 minutes before he responded, because he was unsure of the reality of what was happening next door. This savior restrained my attacker and I ran. I don't think I've ever run so fast in my life. I remember feeling like if I did not run, I would be killed, and this was my only chance to escape. The attorneys later determined in court I'd run over a mile. I knocked from door to door, but if someone did not answer immediately, I continued. I finally saw a party and went in. I can only imagine what would have been the look on those college kids' faces. Honestly, I think I realized how horrifying I appeared, because the only words that came out of my mouth were, "Sorry, I'm about to wreck your party." When the police arrived, I wasn't crying. I didn't appear weak. I think I was more in shock and kind of babbling and telling stories, because I wasn't sure how to handle the whole situation. The policeman wasn't sure of how to construe this, and according to policy, locked me in the back of a police car. I remember thinking, did I just commit a crime? How humiliating is it to be locked in the back of a cop car? I was taken to the police station, and I was locked in a holding cell. After some questions, I was eventually taken home. I was so disillusioned by the whole event, I went straight to bed. I woke, rinsed off my bruised and bloody face, and asked my friends to give me a ride. My friends were shocked and asked where was I headed off to. I explained I was going to find my cell phone and my car keys and find the bastard that did this to me. I think that moment really defined me. I had no idea how much strength I was capable of until that moment. I located some clothing in the trailer and eventually my keys. I asked my friends to contact the police to assist in the retrieval of my other property. We were told that when the on-duty officer who had assisted me the night before comes back on duty at midnight, he would follow up on the lead. I was appalled, infuriated, and honestly, I was a little embarrassed. We hung up the phone. My next action may give you just a hint to my personality and my never give up attitude, but I had my friends call back the police and report a robbery. I told my friends to fully explain my intention to break the window open of the trailer, should they not come to help me immediately. A number of police vehicles showed up shortly thereafter as I waited impatiently. I think that's when my case was taken more seriously. I was not a strung-out drug user, partying type, who found myself in trouble all the time, and I had finally proven it. And even if I was, does that mean I deserved what happened to me? My injuries were photographed, I was questioned again, and I was taken to the hospital where I was examined and tested more than 12 hours after the incident. For any of you who have survived a traumatic event, you may know some of the idiosyncrasies I developed. In my house, I would get up every minute and a half and check that every door was locked. If anyone ever came up behind me, I'd become extremely startled and angry. When I did return to work a couple weeks later, I still had to pay my bills. I sometimes would just start spontaneously crying uncontrollably and couldn't stop and need to be sent home from work. As part of the Victim Witness program, I did receive much needed counseling, and slowly but surely, I had to start dealing with the trial side of things, which is another topic I will not discuss today. I realized that I needed to make a life change. I'd been waitressing for years, and with a degree, was not utilizing my talents. I began searching the job market, which was luckily much more promising in 2007, and started by asking one of my past professors from UCSC if I could use her as a reference. We checked in once in a while, but I had not told her any of what had happened. She replied that she was happy to be a reference, and she knew of a great job for me, volunteer coordinator of Friends Outside. As I reviewed the job description, I noticed that it was organizing volunteers to serve those incarcerated and their family members to reduce the recidivism or the revolving door cycle. I was aghast. If I could have, I may have thrown that computer out the window. As far as I was concerned, the jail should be burned down. I almost wanted to light the computer on fire. How in the world would it be considered ever that I would help people in jail? I shared this with my partner, and he told me to calm down and sleep on it, and that it seemed very coincidental that she would think I was appropriate for the job. I chuckled inside. What irony. But now when I look back, I think, how serendipitous. Today, I've spoken at length with drug addicts, gang members, dropouts, sex offenders, spousal abusers, both men and women, drug dealers and manufacturers, identity thieves, and more. I've heard a lifetime of stories, some heartbreaking, some rewarding, some amazing, and some downright depressing. Now I want to speak of how I came to heal. I would not be able to come up here and speak about this traumatic event should I have not had this time. Working with those people in custody, I know just like society, not one person in jail is the same. If there was a magic light switch to cure addiction or criminal behaviors, I know that everyone at this table would have turned it on a long time ago. I was victimized because of an unusual series of circumstances, and as I like to call myself, I am a survivor. I read articles about how to support offenders, addicts, and others incarcerated. I go to conferences of the best minds in the field who study criminology for a living and give their generations of research as a template for how change can occur. But most importantly, I talk with someone incarcerated or released almost every day. It's kind of a joke around my office how I can't take on clients because I never let them go. It is the knowing that any support I can offer can change someone's life that supports me in regaining confidence that I can be a part of the solution, that I can create a better tomorrow. And through the various programs of Friends Outside, I know I'm a part of that mission every day. I know I cannot solve every bad thing that happens, and I know that bad people are out there, and I am in no way in denial of that. I'm the first person to advocate for prison for violent offenders, but they all get out sometime. My attacker will be out in January 2013. When I think about it, it scares me. Not just for myself, but for the community members out there. And I can almost guarantee he has not changed while in prison, and being exposed daily to such a violent environment that he's gotten worse. My hope with the little that we can do is to change the way we deal with offenders in custody and perhaps have more preventative measures before they go in. People are still going to go to jail and prison, and that is not going to change. How we can come together as a community is to determine how we can change the way we do business so that if someone goes to jail, In some way, their behaviors are changed upon release. We have a wealth of research. We know what works. In Santa Cruz, we are utilizing evidence-based practices to change how we do business and continuing to develop even better data-driven models. The board is demanding research-based approaches to all new suggested designs for corrections and community programming through AB 109 funding. Now it is time for the community to come together to be a model in California and beyond. In many counties, including here, the way it stands now, people are just cycling in and out, lost in a system, confined by labels, and many are looking for healing or a way out of the situation they have themselves in. And we can all do better than that for our own safety. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jesus. I'm a grateful recovering addict. I've been clean for about 46 months now. But you know, that hasn't always been the case. My track record shows that I cannot use successfully. I've been in and out of jail for a large portion of my life. I spent some time in prison, and I did a lot of outpatient and inpatient treatment centers. And it was really difficult for me to wrap my mind around the concept of how somebody can put together a 24-hour period of clean time. And I often think to myself, where would I be today if the resources in this community were not available to me? And before I move on and tell you what my life is like now, I want to briefly just tell you that if recovery is possible for me, it's possible for anybody. Today my life's different because I received the help from the community. I went to Alto and put together some clean time through Prop 36 twice. And I also went to Santa Cruz Residential and Si Se Puede. And in between the times that I received treatment, I noticed that my clean time started to get greater than the time I was using. So I would put together clean time, more clean time, and the using started to minimize. And I received the help that I needed, and I learned about addictive behaviors. I learned about denial patterns and criminal thinking. And one day it just happened to me, the light came on. But the reason why it happened to me is because the seed was planted. The seed was planted, and eventually I understood that I could not go on living like that, caged up like an animal, being a liability to my community instead of an asset. Life's a little bit different today than it was before. Today I'm working 2 jobs, I'm taking 12 units, and I'm raising a child with a disability. And I never thought I would be doing anything like that in my life. You know, I'm basically living a dream. The last time I used, I had about 9 months clean, and my daughter, she was about 7 months at the time. She was diagnosed with a medical condition, and I picked up over it, you know. I went and I started with the drugging again, and I can honestly tell you that that's the most cowardly thing I've ever done in my life, and I own up to it. They told me my kid was going to die, and I went to go get high instead of trying to be there for her or seek a solution to support my family. And I ended up in Paul Marigonda's courtroom, and I was rescued by the Scotts Valley Police Department. They came to my rescue. They saved my life. They took me into custody, and man, from there, I started going to meetings and working steps, and I started hanging out with people in the recovery community. I had to do a little bit of jail time and a little bit of program. I wasn't going to get off the hook easy. And while this was going on, my daughter's medical condition continued to progress. And I remember a couple of times when I was in jail, her lung had collapsed, and I was allowed to leave the jail for about 7 to 10 days, and I think I did this twice. And Paul let me leave and come back, and he trusted that I was going to leave, stay clean, and come back, and that's what I did. He told me that, you know, I needed to keep doing what I was doing if I wanted to stay clean. And I did that. I did that. When I got out of jail, I was able to be there for my daughter. And she was home with us for the first 18 months. She has a medical condition. It's called SMA, spinal muscular atrophy. It affects her motor skills. And the average lifespan for a child with SMA is about 1 year to 18 months. And I now understood that it was possible to stay clean and be there for my family. Like, I understood that, and it took me a while, man. Relapse after relapse. I just couldn't get it, and now I was facing these hard times, man. Staring at the face of adversity, and I was able to develop a relationship with God, become a productive member of society, and be there for my daughter. And after the first 18 months when she was at home, at Stanford, she had a tracheostomy, and, you know, we had to place her in a care facility in Campbell. And I remember how difficult it was for me having to make the commute and stay here and go to meetings. And eventually I was allowed the opportunity to look for a job, and I became employable. And I never thought when I was locked up that I would be able to even hold a job or show up for my daughter. And in between the time I was raising my daughter while she was at this care facility, I was working with other addicts in recovery to help them stay clean. I was going back to the programs that I had graduated from and keeping in touch with them and just letting them know that although I relapsed, that I was still clean and that recovery was possible. I wanted to inspire them. Eventually, it became about giving back too, you know, to my community. So outside of recovery, because of what I was going through with my daughter at this facility, they were training me how to take care of children on ventilators. And my goal is to eventually bring her home, so I had to go through this extensive training. I had to go through a training manual, and I basically had to learn how to do everything that a nurse does, everything that a respiratory therapist does, a certified nurse assistant. And I went through this manual, and I was able to bring her home, and I was able to eventually bring her home, but, you know, there were some obstacles. I didn't have transportation, so I had to save up for modification, for a wheelchair van. Me and my girlfriend, we were able to do that. And, you know, she's pretty stable, and right now she's 4 years and 9 months. And that's amazing. It truly is a blessing. You know, when I walk in a room, depending on where I'm at today, you know, I'm a proud student, a proud father, or people look up to me as somebody that can be a leader as an example of how recovery can work in somebody's life. And I now happen to work for the organization that helped plant the seed. You know, I'm working at Si Se Puede in Watsonville with other addicts. And I'm really grateful. I'm going to school to become a respiratory therapist. My goal is to work with children on ventilators like my daughter. I was working with my daughter one time, and the doctor was telling me, you know, you do this so well, why don't you go get licensed? And I was thinking, well, I have a criminal record. And he told me, you know what, I'll write you a letter if you want. I didn't know that about you. When you walk in here, I see a responsible person. You're telling me that, you know, you have a past? And I told him about my drug addiction, and he said, the people in the community will support you if you be honest. And I was just amazed. And so I'm working on some prerequisites. I'm applying at Foothill, San Bruno, and Ohlone College, and I want to give back to my community outside of the recovery, you know. I want to work with these kids. My daughter's coming home in January. If I can stay clean, anyone can stay clean. Thank you.
You know, we're here to be educated, to be involved, but we're also here to be inspired. And I thank you to Danielle and Jesus for really inspiring us. Now we've come to the question and answer part. This is the part where we were going to hopefully hear from you, hear your questions, your ideas, your concerns, and be able to have our panel here, plus some other folks that are here that have expertise, be able to bring along. And come on up. So we have District Attorney Bob Lee that's here, and we'll ask these people to come up and sit up here so that they'll be available for questions. We have our Santa Cruz County Probation Chief, Scott McDonald. We have Santa Cruz City Police Lieutenant Colleen McMahon, Professor Craig Reineman, and Larry Biggam from the Public Defender's Office. And we have a number of other people that are in the audience that are here. Kevin Vogel, Police Chief from Santa Cruz PD. Okay. And we have a number of questions. What I'm going to ask is, so we'll go through these questions, and if somebody has a comment you want to make or an answer, please feel free to signal me and I'll call on you. So, first question, will somebody please explain what the Supreme Court said about our state prisons? You, Judge Marigonda?
Well, the United States Supreme Court in the Brown versus Plata decision basically said that the California state prisons were so overcrowded that it essentially violated the 8th Amendment to the United States Constitution, cruel and unusual punishment. And it was a 5-4 decision with a very distinct split, but on one side of it was Justice Kennedy from Sacramento, Anthony Kennedy, who's from Sacramento, and I think he was in the lead on the decision, but really it focused on the 8th Amendment cruel and unusual punishment, and the overcrowding was just something that they said had to be addressed immediately.
And the second question, we have a long question here, is what happens to chronic low-level offenders, shoplifters, drunks, illegal camping, etc., who are non, who fail to appear in court under this new system, but who have tremendous impact on this community? What happens if the jail is full to these chronic offenders?
Good evening. My name is Bob Lee. I'm the District Attorney of Santa Cruz County. And that's a very interesting question because today at 4 o'clock I was in Supervisor Coonerty's office discussing that issue. AB 109 affects a lot of systems in the criminal justice system. And one of those are the lowest level offenders. And what we were discussing earlier today was what we call serial inebriates. The people in Pacific Avenue who, unfortunately, because of maybe tragedy in their life or whatever reason, are what we call drunken publics. The people that are just inebriated on Pacific Avenue or other locations in our county. And we call them serial inebriates because they pick up drunk in public on a daily basis. And we have a great program. It's called the SIP program, which is the Serial Inebriate program, where we try to give them help. We try to program them like we do a lot of things in Santa Cruz County. I was really proud of Jesus' story because that's a traditional story that we've used here in 20 years in Santa Cruz County. AB 109 talks about rehabilitation and giving people's chances. We've done that for about 20 years. And I'm proud of the fact that our community has looked at rehabilitation as one of the tools. But in the Serial Inebriate program, a very successful program, what we do is that we offer them either on their first offense, and it's actually the 7th or 6th offense. My office doesn't file the first 6. And when they come up to 7, we bring them into court and offer them 30 days in rehab or 30 days in jail. On the second round, we offer them 90 days in rehab or 90 days in jail. And on the third round, we offer them 180 days, which is a long-term program in rehab, or 180 days in jail. It's their choice. It's an agreement with the Board of Supervisors, the public defender, the courts, and really with Dominican Hospital and their staff. Because as you've read in the Sentinel over the years, serial inebriates cost us a lot of money, especially for the hospitals where they go in and out in the emergency rooms and clog up the emergency rooms. It's a very successful program. We've had 11 in the last 6 months or so, and I think 5 have become clean and sober, which is a startling statistic because we tried this years ago and we didn't have that result. But because jail space is so valuable now, because we're making and weighing and balancing these decisions about who should go to jail and who shouldn't, the serial inebriate program could be left out in the dark. And we're hoping that's not the case. We're hoping that we can find some method or means to still keep these people treatment, but it's hard to give them treatment when a person has picked up 6 or 7 drunken publics, when at the same time we're being asked to put on community supervision someone who's had 6 or 7 driving under the influence cases. And that's a balance that we have to go with public safety in a variety of these issues. So to answer your question, AB 109 is a domino that's going to affect the lower level offenders in many, many ways.
Next question is, will new state funds cover all the costs of the new county plan, or will existing county budget also have to contribute? Maybe our Chief Probation Officer, Scott McDonald.
The sheriff might want to add to this as well. The local criminal justice system has been woefully underfunded for many years. The money that is being reallocated to this county this fiscal year is $1.6 million, which might sound like a lot of money, but it really isn't once we start developing the programs that we've developed. However, I think we have a sheriff who's forward-thinking, who's looking to maximize alternatives to incarceration that have been proven to be successful where applied. You know, when we're looking, when we're putting that against the system that we have right now, which has been taking nonviolent felons, sending them to prison, if I were to dream up a place to produce a criminal, it would be, I'd be throwing a lot of deviant people together in small spaces without treatment, and then dumping them back into the community without any resources. That's the system we have right now that's producing 70% failure rates within the first 3 years. The money that we're using right now will go to alternatives to incarceration, treatment, and community supervision. Research says the most effective methods to reduce recidivism are intensive community supervision combined with treatment, as long as that treatment is evidence-based. And that's what we're planning to do with the dollars. It'll be tight, but we're doing the best with the dough that's coming to us.
Thanks, Scott. I think this is a question for Sheriff Wowak. Does the County of Santa Cruz plan on expanding the county jail, and when?
As I mentioned, Santa Cruz County has 448 beds today. Previously, and we currently have an infrastructure to house 600 people in custody. But our plan is not to add jail beds to the current system above what we have today, which is a 600-bed capacity, although we don't have enough staff to staff all those beds. Our plan is really to, as I mentioned in both my speech and to dovetail on what the chief said, is to use the AB 109 dollars, although they're very small, to find ways to incarcerate people and to get people accountable so that they don't return to the system. If we simply just build more beds to put more people in, we're duplicating the state prison system, which has failed and has brought the AB 109 problem to us. So in short, our goal is not in the interim to add more jail beds to our current jail system. It's to find better ways to use the dollars that were given in AB 109 to reduce recidivism and keep offenders from coming back into custody.
And this is a question for Scott. It says, what experience does Santa Cruz have with evidence-based practices, and what is evidence-based practices? Can you explain that to us?
Evidence-based practices is something for a lot of justice systems quite new. Traditionally, justice systems have done what feels good, what sounds good, independent of what the evidence says. There's been a growing body of research that says you can assess risk, you can identify what those risk factors are for an individual. There are a certain set of risk factors that are highly linked to recidivism, and that if targeting those risk factors with services, you can reduce recidivism. In the criminal justice system, the top 4 risk factors have to do with criminal thinking, criminal associations, and there are targeted strategies, in particular cognitive behavioral treatment programs that have been proven and demonstrated study after study after study to reduce recidivism. In Santa Cruz, since 2000, we've been implementing evidence-based programs on the juvenile side, including risk assessments, evidence-based programs, cognitive behavioral programs. We have a lot of folks in the room. And in fact, if you're from the treatment community or mental health system or nonprofit system that's worked with offenders in this community, could you stand up in the room just to get a sense of some of the providers here? And I can tell you, in this community, most of the providers here that are standing up have been working in partnership with the probation department implementing evidence-based practices. There will always be the bad case. None of us has the silver bullet that can stop all crime. But what we should be doing is putting all our resources into evidence-based practices that can reduce recidivism rather than do just what we think feels good. Remember boot camps? They produced crime. Remember scared straight programs? They're not effective. So we're reading the research and we're implementing what's effective.
Thank you. Next question is, what accountability measures will be in place for our nonprofits? There is over $600,000 available from the state to them. How can we make sure that the right nonprofits are getting these funds? Anybody want to tackle this one?
It's a phenomenal question, whoever wrote it, and the true answer is it remains to be seen. As I mentioned when I spoke earlier, we have a community corrections partnership. The community corrections partnership is made up of 14 people in our community, 7 of which are part of the criminal justice system and are the executive commission. And I'll miss one of them, so I'm not going to name them all, but quite a number of them are up here, including Judge Marigonda, the district attorney, the public defender, Scott McDonald, myself. And our role in the next phase of AB 109 is to do exactly what this question asks, and that is to identify the treatment programs that we're going to put in place both in the custody system and out of custody, identify the measures that are responsible through the evidence-based practices that the chief just talked about, and hold those providers accountable for results. we're looking at a number of different models as to who will be, and I use the term czar, to overlook that program and to really look at those treatment models and make sure that they're providing the services and the results that are needed. So we don't have an immediate answer today, and I can't point to a person in the audience and say that's going to be that person, but I can tell you that that is the core mission of the next phase of the Community Corrections Partnership.
So it says the next question is for Sheriff Wowak, but I think maybe Larry Biggam and Judge Marigonda may also want to speak to this question. He said, you said 60% of the current jail population are there for pre-sentencing. What proportion of those are pre-trial? And of those, how many have had bail set, meaning a judge has determined that it is safe to the public to release them in pre-trial, even if they post bail? Couldn't many of these people be released from jail pre-trial, even if they cannot afford bail? Are you looking at ways to change pre-trial release to free up space?
I'll start, but then I'll let Scott finish up. Okay. Everyone that comes into custody has bail set. Bail is permitted. Again, I kind of go back to the United States Constitution. It's the 8th Amendment allows bail. So everyone is entitled bail. There are processes that are allowed by statute. California Penal Code allows for people to be released on bail or on their own recognizance. And I say this before a lot, and I've said it in other groups. You know, I always reference the Penal Code. I reference the statutes. Well, the judges are governed by what is in the Penal Code that is prepared by the legislature or the people by initiative. That can also be, that's how the process of change is. We don't, and we have certain rules and procedures that we have to follow that are dictated by the Judicial Council through the rules of court that we're also duty-bound to follow. But in Santa Cruz County, everyone that does come through, bail can be denied in serious or set very high with serious felonies, and that's set out in the California Constitution, Article 1, Section 12, which, and bail hearings can be set for serious felonies where there's, you know, someone who is charged with, let's say, murder, serious robbery, use of a gun. Those are factors that a judge has to look at. But in terms of pretrial release procedures, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Probation Officer McDonald because he can talk to you about the the Probation Department's pretrial release procedures.
It's nice to be asked a question when you have the data right in front of you. And the Correction Standards Authority gets data from all the jails on the pre-trial jail population. In California right now, there's been a growing pre-trial population in our jails across the state. And the state average is 71% of the jail population are pretrial offenders. Now, these are folks who are going through their constitutional due process. So they're going through court to determine whether they're guilty of the crime. 71%. In Santa Cruz, we are 53.8%. One of the reasons why we're under the state average is because we've implemented effective pretrial programs. Charlie Smith, you should stand up and take some credit for this because since 2005, we have identified through a validated evidence-based risk assessment who can safely attend court without reoffending and successfully appearing for court. 98% do not reoffend while they're going to court. Those 2% have been minor offenses to date, and 96% make all court appearances. So those programs have been very effective in reducing the jail population, and that means that those folks are held accountable maybe through electronic monitoring, they're staying employed as they go through the court process. So that's one example of something we've done in Santa Cruz that has readied ourselves for this new legislation. In many counties, they're having to build new jail space because they didn't take these proactive steps. And by the way, we've had 14 counties now since AB 109 come out to learn about our pretrial programs because they want to implement them.
I thought if I would just give some general comments because I've been asked a lot about what I think of AB 109 and from our perspective, the District Attorney's Office here in town. Even though we're on a topic called Smart on Crime, we're not going to judge it yet. I haven't given a label to it yet because we're just starting this process. And as any new law in the state of California, until the attorneys go at it and play with it in court, sometimes there's unintended consequences. So even though it's been labeled Smart on Crime here, I'm not going to grade it necessarily because I don't know if it's going to be, to use that expression, an honor student or somebody with a dunce cap. I mean, there's real benefits to this particular legislation. We all want to improve the system. We all want to take some of the problems that we think at the state level and bring it back to the community. So we're all working together to try to do that, and that's one of the real strong benefits of revamping the system. But there's also some issues with the system, and I think that since we're having a dialogue, we probably should talk about some of those issues. The AB 109 statute, the way it was written, kind of has too broad a net to what we call non-non-nons. They're the non-serious, non-violent, non-sex registers. But what that does not include, and what is now going to be given local jurisdiction, is a variety of crimes, including people that abuse the elderly, people that embezzle thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Drug dealers are now all local. So if you have a person who comes to Santa Cruz with a kilo of meth, a kilo of cocaine, and a truckload of Oxycontin, he's going to be given local time in Santa Cruz County. He's going to be given local time in every county in the state. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily a good thing for AB 109. Let me give you a couple examples that have just come through our office in the past 2 weeks. We had a gentleman that was arrested for passing bad checks. He stole them from an 83-year-old woman, emptied out her checking account. He has a prior grand theft, a prior passing bad checks. He has done 2 car burglaries and 1 10851, which has stolen a car. He's got 5 or 6 prior felonies in roughly the last 8 years. He is now a person that we're going to give local time to, and we're fighting for those jail bed spaces for. So he gets sentenced to local time. What does that do to the sheriff's office? He then has to let out people because this person is now not going to state prison. We want to give him a timeout from our community because we deserve a timeout from him. But now, based on AB 109, he could be let out within 6 months and given local supervision. In fact, in the past 2 weeks, we've had somebody that was on GPS monitoring that did 2 burglaries. He had a prior, I think, a burg and a rape, so he's possibly a 3-striker now. And the only reason we caught him is because after we got a hint that was him, we went back to his GPS monitor and we found out that he was at the locations of the 2 burglaries. His prelim is actually on Monday. So AB 109 has some issues. It has some problems, and we're trying to deal with it. A lot of times when we went through these non-non-nons, these people that we have previously sent to what we call a timeout, or in this case, a longer sentence in county jail, what we found is a lot of them had prior treatment, and some of them have actually victimized us while they were in treatment. In fact, the first person that we're receiving was a man from Glenn County who was convicted of possession for sale of drugs in Glenn County. In fact, he was placed on probation. He was actually in a residential treatment here in Santa Cruz. He's the very first person that we've received as a non in Santa Cruz County. So the difference between what we're going to look at AB 109 and what we now look at, and the DA's office has never really cared where these people were housed. In fact, I never understood why we housed non-violent people with violent people. But what we do care about is the time they're away from our community because they victimized our community. And this community has to make a determination and a decision. When people are going through rehab and they continue to either walk away from the rehab, bench warrant from the rehab, or commit another crime while they're in rehab, we have to at some point, based on their record, based on what they've done and how many victims they've had before, we have to ask this question to ourselves. When does their rehabilitation not include our community's victimization? That's really one of the major issues in this particular area of AB 109. And we at the DA's office is hoping that the public will understand that we've given people chances and will continue giving people chances at helping themselves, people like Jesus. But when they victimize us, and I'm talking about victimize us from elder abuse and theft cases, and there are chronic thieves, that we have to at some point say enough is enough, and we'll have to house them and keep them housed as long as possible. Thank you.
There certainly are going to be challenges and opportunities there. The one thing we do know is we can't go back to the old system, and the old system produced 70% reoffenders, and so we have to move on and hopefully do something wiser. So one of the other questions, we're going to try to get these other questions, is, this is for Sheriff Wowak, will you still release low-level nonviolent offenders even if they have an ICE detainer? Are you going to exclude low-level offenders and domestic violence victims from ICE detainers so they don't get deported?
Okay, the question is whether or not I would release low-level offenders if they have an ICE detainer. No offender with detainers for either immigration services, warrants from other counties or other jurisdictions, or holds for probation, parole, or the like will be released, even if they're a low-level offender. So that doesn't automatically exclude them because they have an ICE detainer. And the second half of the question was, or am I going to exclude low-level offenders and domestic violence victims? We don't house or hold on to victims in the system, and so we wouldn't hang on to them and hold them from deportation as well.
This is a question for Chief Cardell. How many offenders can be processed by the Community Review Board in a year? Also, how many would you like to be able to serve with this program? And another part of that question is, are board members trained, and describe the training?
Last answer to the question, yes, they are trained. We teach them, you know, basically how to do the review board and explain the process, so forth. We like to serve as many as we can in this program. Right now we've had, I believe, about 80 offenders go through the program.
Next question is, with more serious offenders in our county jail, how do we stop these offenders from being released in downtown Santa Cruz? Can they be returned to their community, in county or out, when they are released?
If someone who is in a serious offender in the county jail, depends on where their community is and where they go. For example, recently the legislature about a year and a half ago changed the law that if a person is on probation but is a resident of another county, the entire case is to be transferred to that other county. A good example is someone comes over here, commits an auto theft in Santa Cruz County. The person is not sent to state prison or to county jail for a straight term, but is granted a period of 3 years probation under supervision of the probation department, and is ordered to serve a year in county jail. At the conclusion of that, if they go back to their home county, their entire file is supervised. We don't touch that anymore. We can place conditions, terms and conditions of release as part of a term and condition of probation if it has a nexus, a connection to the crime. For example, if someone has committed a theft from a particular location, we can order, as a condition of probation, that that person stay away from that location. You cannot simply order someone to stay away from a particular place without some kind of a connection or a nexus to that. That's proscribed. It's also a ban on the constitutional right to travel. I think that's a 1940 case out of the United States Supreme Court. But we have to balance the community's needs and community's concerns with what we're constitutionally permitted to do as dictated. As lower court judges, we have quite a bit of discretion, but if there is a decision of a higher court, even the Court of Appeal in San Jose, which governs us, that tells us we cannot do this, then we're duty bound to follow what a higher court says, and that's a 50-year-old decision out of the California Supreme Court. I hope that answers a little bit.
Here's two questions, I think, for the probation department. How can people pay for electronic monitoring after being in jail for a time? They've probably lost their jobs and housing. And will the probation department hold offenders accountable for restitution they owe, not release them from probation until they satisfy the order?
So the electronic monitoring, first off, we charge based on ability to pay. Particularly in the pretrial, constitutionally, pretrial services was invented in lieu of bail. So it was invented for the indigent who could not afford to post bail, but could appear for court successfully without reoffending. So the electronic monitoring device, believe it or not, is not that expensive. It's about $3 to $4 a day, depending on what, so in some cases, we pay for it. But in most cases, by charging offenders on a scale of ability to pay, those that have the resources will offset the cost of the others. The other question was about holding offenders accountable to restitution they owe. This is very important. For those non-ons that have gone to prison, we certainly aren't collecting restitution. But what we hope to do is work with our community partners. We have either to give back to the community, either through restorative justice programs that provide work service in the community. The Sheriff's Department has a lot of work service projects. We have Community Action Board that does a lot of work service projects. Those work service projects often can lead to jobs. And Community Action Board, for example, has developed job readiness programs, resume writing workshops, and then jobs. And then our job is to collect restitution and make sure victims are compensated. Additionally, for the pretrial programs, for those that are not in jail getting the 3 hots and a cot, we hold them accountable to, if they have a job, they can continue their job, and we hold them accountable to paying the restitution while they're in those programs. So that's an emphasis that we make.
This is a question about flash incarceration. If a person can be placed in jail for 10 days without being taken before a judge or appointed a defense lawyer, how is it determined that that person did in fact commit a violation? What if the person claims there was a mistake, that they did not actually violate the condition? Are those as due process protected?
I'm concerned about the 10-day flash incarceration with no lawyer and no due process and no hearing. It hasn't been used. I'm assuming it's going to be used sparingly, but there's so many sanctions short of flash incarceration that I hope it's not used often. But I think there's some due process challenges that we're going to have to play out in court on this one, and I don't frankly like it. It seems totally un-American, and may, if necessary, make the case with probable cause to a court, have some basic due process, and we can be quick and efficient but fair. That's my opinion. That's not the way the statute is written, and I'm sure we'll litigate. while I've got the podium, I want to respond briefly to my opinion to Bob on why I think AB 109 is a good thing. We have 5% of the population of the world in this country, and yet 25% of its inmates. We have more people per capita in prison in California than any state in the Union, in any country in the world. We spend $9 billion a year on incarceration, and what do we get for it? Almost a 70% failure rate. So on a cost-benefit analysis, it's a failure. The RAND Corporation has shown us that taxpayers get 7 times more bang for their buck in treatment than through incarceration. So I think this makes sense. I think we can make better decisions at the local level. 80% of these non-nons are drug offenders, and they're not getting treatment at San Quentin or Soledad, but they can get more treatment here at the farm and through Scott's office than they were at state prison. And I'm sure our recidivist rate will improve over the state prison's record. So I think it's good. It doesn't affect the timing of sentences, it only affects the location, and I think we'll give them more services. So I think it's smart on crime, and I think it's healthy policy. My concern with it is funding, because we need long-term sustained funding to make it work. Otherwise, it's going to be like Prop 36, where it starts off good, gets defunded, and these poor people are out there on their own without enough support or treatment capacity. So we need sustained funding. The governor has promised a constitutional amendment to give us that, and I hope he and the legislature follow through with that. Thank you very much.
It's not the first time that Larry and Bob have had differences of opinion, but can judges start having more stay-away orders since our local jails will be filled with prison-quality inmates? What are ideas that we as a community can put in place to keep us safe and have a quality life?
Let me tell you a little bit what the process of the case is. And having been a former prosecutor before I became a judge, I kind of know how it goes. The prosecutor and the defense attorney are the ones that really know the case. They're the ones that know the ins and outs of it. So the judges rely on the attorneys knowing the facts, knowing what the nuances are, knowing what the critical issues are that matter to both sides. How does that play into the question that's been asked? If a judge is going to be asked to order someone to stay away from a location, it goes back to what I said earlier. There has to be some logical connection, a logical nexus to be able to make that order. There has to be some connection to the crime or crimes in order for the court to do that. 1975 decision of the California Supreme Court says, judges have broad discretion with regard to what probation terms are set. But again, it has to have that connection. So if we're going to order stayaways from locations, and that can be in terms of probation grants, or what we call these split sentences where they serve some period of time in custody, some period of time of mandatory supervision. If we're provided with the information, if it has a logical connection, we can make those orders, and we can make those orders. Violations of those orders are violations that can lead to custody, can lead to other sanctions. But, this is why, as with anything, it's kind of a team effort. It's the attorneys working to educate the court. It's the court using what's brought in front of it to make an informed decision. And, if you're a victim of the crime, if you're someone who's affected with it, need to let the court know, need to let the probation department know if there's a probation report, need to let the district attorney know, who is able to tell the court what's happening. And so the more information that we have as judges, the better a decision we can make, including these stayaways and other conditions which we know are very important to the particular victim of the crime, because much of what we talk about here affects you on a daily basis. And we know a lot of these crimes now, grand theft, vandalism, identity theft, that cannot be punished by state prison unless the person has some kind of a violent crime in the past or something other disqualifying are crimes that affect you directly. I can't tell you how many times I've seen cases that have come before me. An identity theft may seem like, you know, okay, there's a crime here, but the hours that are spent by the person whose identity is stolen is something that's immeasurable, and you can't get those back. So we do take all of that into account. We just need to have that information.
I think this is for Sheriff Wowak. What are people in our jail for? What percentage of our jail population is in for violent offenses? For drug offenses, can you give us a snapshot of who's in our jail now?
The true answer to that question changes daily. We constantly play what we call human Sudoku. Every day we're moving people based on their offense, their ability to get along, their association with others, their time close to release, and so I don't have a complete snapshot. I can tell you that with respect to AB 109, as of today, we're 1 month into AB 109, and we've had 13 people sentenced to Santa Cruz County Jail that would have otherwise gone to state prison. That's in the first month, and we hopefully won't continue along those lines. Of those 13, I believe 5 of them were women, which is almost double the incarceration rate for women on average. As I mentioned when I spoke earlier, only 48 of the 475 people in custody today were women. So that's a vast change in the women to men piece. Each and every one of those 13, though, was a felony of some sort because it is an AB 109 piece. On average, we ran about a 25 to 30% low-level or misdemeanor incarceration rate in our jail population, and that is the population that we're targeting for custody alternatives. A misdemeanor or low-level offenses that don't present a risk to the community when released on supervision. And to go to the question about stay-away orders or supervision of people once they're released, we're finding that an added benefit to electronic monitoring is the ability to monitor a person who has a stay-away location. So our custody alternative team can set a location like an area where a person is normally offending or drinking or using drugs, or set a perimeter around a victim who is a victim of a low-level crime, and make sure that that person doesn't go near there. Now, the district attorney spoke about a case we recently had where we found an offender, or proved that an offender was actually at a crime because of their ankle monitor. We just don't catch them all, okay? But eventually, I believe this system will work in our favor. So I hope that answers the demographics question.
I think this may be for the judge. Does minimum sentencing laws interfere with maximizing the reduction in recidivism and reducing the overall load of people in state, prison, or county jails? How much leeway will judges have, and will they act?
That's an interesting question when you talk about minimum sentencing laws, because when I kind of went back and started doing some research, and a lot of it's in this folder, you kind of go back to a lot of what we talk about happened in the 70s, mid-70s with Governor Brown. Before we had these sentencing statutes, we had what was called indeterminate sentencing. Remember the old Dragnet show where the people used to get sentenced at the end and they say now serving a sentence of 1 to 10? In the county, in the state prison. That was the way it used to be. A judge sentenced somebody to 1 to 10. Grand theft was 1 to 10. You go to prison from 1 year to 10. It was up to you to convince the parole board that you should get out. Judges still had the ability to grant people probation. Probation is where you put people on supervision, can have them serve up to a year in county jail. Then in 1976, with the determinate sentencing law, you come up with these triads. If you are going to send somebody to prison or now county jail, it's a minimum of, the base range is 16 months, 2 years, 3 years, and it depends on the crime. Certain robbery is 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, sex crimes 3, 6, 8, and you can attach consecutive sentences to that. The minimum and maximum sentences, they don't really have a large effect on what you do, because someone can still be granted probation if they are eligible. If they are not, obviously the 3 strikes law may come into play where a sentence is doubled. Judges have some discretion to move within that. The determinate sentencing law and how you figure out what these numbers are is one of the reasons why if you want to be a criminal lawyer or a judge, you should really have a good math background, because you end up doing more fractions and computations than anything you ever saw. Your kids who are doing algebra would be very good at being able to make these computations. But it is something that there are certain areas where we are not able to grant probation. The situation that Bob Lee described, their district attorney, is one where you cannot, for example, if a person has a prior offense for drug dealing and is caught drug dealing again, they cannot be granted probation. Well, until October 1st, meaning they could not be granted probation means they had to be sent to state prison. Now, those are the people that the district attorney was talking about, are the people that could be looking at 6, 7, 8 years in county jail. And this is one of the anomalies in AB 109 that really wasn't addressed, and is one of the areas that perhaps may be looked at again. But as I said before, when we talk about these minimums, when we talk about the sentencing ranges, those are set by the legislature or the people by initiative, and that's where the fix has to come. But in answer to the question, most of the time our discretion is not affected. There are these few statutes that prohibit that kind of sentencing discretion.
Thank you. And our last question is going to be, do you have a target rate for reduction of the recidivism rate in Santa Cruz County? If so, what is our goal? Anybody?
Quite simply, we'd love to be in the business of getting out of business. So a recidivism rate of 0 would be absolutely wonderful, and that would be the overarching goal. We know that that's not achievable. We know that we're absolutely able, I believe, to do a better job than we've done it before. And so in closing, to cut from a 70% recidivism rate, which is a nationwide average, which is the state of California average, and roughly a 67% recidivism rate, which is Santa Cruz County's average, our goal is to significantly reduce that, I hope, by at least half. Thank you.
Thank you. So first and foremost, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. Hopefully you're walking away with a lot more information about this issue. An involved community is very important, and it's going to be important as we face the challenges and the opportunities that are here with this change of law. I also want to thank our panelists tonight. They brought a lot of expertise and a lot of clarification of the problem and what we have. I want to thank our volunteers who have helped put this on. I also want to encourage you again in the lobby. We have some of the service providers who deal with these issues, and they're willing to talk to you if you want to find out more about it. We're going to have another Smart on Crime forum in probably the South County after the first of the year. If you'd like to work on the committee that forms that or do anything like that, be sure to let us know, smartoncrime@hotmail.com. And we also have a Facebook page. Be sure to look us up there. I want to thank Community TV for filming this tonight. And again, thank you all for coming. Good night.